Hi, this is Brandy Shantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today I'm speaking with Cynthia Hoyer, former Coast Guard officer, multiple sclerosis warrior, and friend. So, welcome, Cynthia.
Hi.
So, I know, you served in the military, same as I did. You were a Coast Guard officer, graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, and it was while you were in the Coast Guard that you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So, could you tell me a little bit about what it was like getting a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis while in the Coast Guard?
Well, it's kind of interesting because if you look at my timeline, I actually had symptoms at the academy, but being the high performance, because that's what's expected.
Mhm.
And I knew the academy was pretty much my only way to college. So I just really pushed myself. And because MS has such weird symptoms, you kind of always think, am I making this up? Am I being too dramatic? This and if you go to the doctor, they just sit there and say that you're they accuse you of being a malinger or faking
Mhm.
it. So I was diagnosed. Let's see, I graduated from the academy in 1996. I went to from Connecticut out to my first ship in Hawaii from 96 to 98. And then while I was on my ship, I was a law enforcement officer. I was a deck watch officer. I was a morale officer. I was what we call shitty little job, SLJO, shitty little jobs officer. We do everything. And you don't get any sleep. And you can go from like the Bering Sea where it's subarctic weather to Panama and Colombia and doing drug interdiction. So that's very intense. You get no sleep. I was doing 2 4-hour watches. I was being a landing safety officer where I'm helping land the helicopters. I'm doing boardings, drug enforcement, fisheries enforcement. It can get pretty intense. I do speak Spanish, but it's only high school Spanish, so it's not really all that great, not really all that fluent. But I would go on as a boarding officer, so you're dealing with the Hispanic uh, and male, female. It's different. It's especially when you're out to sea, they're kind of salty, shall we say? So, and they don't like listening to a female. But I could speak Spanish, and so therefore I knew what they were saying when they were speaking. They were speaking their native tongue.
Right.
Um, so I
And
was
I
pretty
speak
successful.
Farsi and always had to deal with men in Afghanistan who weren't expecting a woman to show up and be the one in charge.
Yeah, dynamics, human
Yes.
dynamics. So I managed to get to flight school. Of course, now I'm down in Pensacola, so it's very hot, very, again, very,
Are you giving the life story?
Sam, I'm on a
Sorry.
podcast. That's my son. He's 21. Um, but, so again, no sleep, high stress, new environment, a lot of information, a lot of boom, 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 a lot of high expectations. So that was 96 to 98. When I winged, I'm sorry, no, 96 to 98 is on the ship. 98 to 2000, I was at flight school. I went to Air Station Humboldt Bay in Northern California, and and that's where I started. So I've been having all these crazy symptoms, but it really kind of came to a head when I was at Humboldt Bay. Again, I don't. I think full blown MS symptoms. I can look back. I definitely had it on my ship. My legs would just go numb. It was very hard to balance, and of course, the ship is moving like this, so that doesn't help any.
It's interesting. It probably makes it even more difficult because I think all of us have the same story. I've had symptoms for years before I got diagnosed, but I thought, it could be anything
Yeah,
or nothing. Maybe it's
right.
the ship rocking me.
Exactly, because I mean, especially because we were a very narrow hull, so it wasn't like an aircraft carrier where it was the big old Bertha. It was like so and huge waves. Um, so I got to Humboldt Bay, and I just couldn't do it. My vision went from color to black and white. My memory just,
Mhm.
was just, it was just gone. It was just too much. I had bought a 1910 Victorian house, so I was remodeling that. I was single at the time, so I'm remodeling the house. I'm doing a lot of watch. I'm staying a lot of duty, trying to get qualified in the aircraft under operations, make it operational, and as a communications officer. So a lot of stuff going on. And finally, I just couldn't handle it, and I resigned my flight status. And they tried to take away my wings, and I said, "But I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
But I can't be here anymore." I said, "I'm not." I think it's one of the things I did learn at flight school is if you're not safe, you can't. It's
Yeah,
your duty.
for the safety of everybody.
Yeah, it's your duty to divulge or let people know. And of course, so I did tell my flight doc. He tried to. Oh, he said I was a malingerer. I need to get my act together, and he said that I had an alcohol problem. No, I mean I was drinking wine. I mean, you're in your early 20s, of course
I
you
know I had a drinking problem in my early 20s. I drink all the time.
yeah, but it wasn't like an alcoholic type of a
Right.
thing. It was, you get home and you're just like, some cheap rosé because you're like, whatever. Make yourself some dinner and get on with the day. Um, so it wasn't until Jason and I got married. Well, actually, if I can be honest, my dog ate my birth control pills.
Oh gosh. Oh,
Yes,
that's hilarious. Of all the things to have,
it's
my
a
dog
chocolate
ate
lab. So I came home, had my little bag of meds, put it on the coffee table, no big deal, and I go off to the restroom to read a magazine because I mean you're just like you're decompressing from the day at work. I came out and there was aluminum foil everywhere, and I'm like, Susie, no, because I thought she'd eaten my Hershey's chocolates, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have any. I'm like,
the
oh no. So Susie was very emotional about it. Just kidding, she wasn't. But I had a conference the next day in San Diego, and yada yada. Yeah,
and that's
surprise.
how it happens.
Yeah. So my fiance became my husband really quickly. So, but anyway, so that's kind of what happened. But and that's why I resigned my flight status was because I just realized I said it's just not worth fighting for. Do I want to go qualify for another helicopter? No. Do I want to go to a different air station? No. It was Coast Guard's small. My reputation was ruined. I knew something was wrong, but I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't break a helicopter. I didn't injure anybody. Something was going on. So
Mhm.
I got transferred down to Marine Safety Office, LA, Long Beach. Jason and I got married. Actually, Jason and I got married, and then I moved down to LA, Long Beach. We lived in Huntington Beach. My house didn't have air conditioning because it was a block and a half off the beach. So therefore,
Well, that's true about California. My house in Monterey didn't have air conditioning.
yeah. But in hindsight, maybe it would have been different if it had AC and I could rest and whatnot. But
Mhm.
anyway, so then I had Sam July 10th of 2001. And next thing we know, we had September 11th, and my awesome husband and new father got deployed.
Mhm.
And anyway, so I dropped him off on the way up. Excuse me. My started getting really numb on my right side, and then at a certain point, I went on a different road. It's one of the toll roads. It's around Dana Point toll road north to about Newport Beach. Anyway, so my right side was already numb. I felt it actually kind of like radiate across. And of course, the science major, I'm like, well, at minute 17, I started feeling symptoms. By the time I hit Newport Beach, my body was completely numb. Like the numb, tingly, shake it out like your arm went to sleep because it was at a funky angle. No big deal, right? So at that time, one of my girlfriends was watching Sam, so I went to go pick up Sam, and it was very scary.
Yeah.
I had a 4-month-old, and we had a 2-story townhouse. How do you get upstairs? Because you can't hold on to anything.
Yep.
You don't really know what you're doing. I mean, you're a new mom, essentially with a newborn.
A new
And
mom, husband's gone, new war. For those of
yeah,
us who remember September 11th, that was a very stressful time.
yes, yes. The so that was Sunday. So on Monday, I went in and saw the flight surgeon. Um, and I had been talking. So my triage nurse, if you will, was a civilian nurse. God bless her, Lynn Ayres, and she was Scottish. And so I told her, I said, this has happened because the numbness, the tingling. I mean, it was so bad that I literally felt like when your chest goes numb and your lungs go numb, and you feel like you can't breathe. And of course, you
Mm-hmm.
can breathe, but you feel like you can't feel it, but it's like a little bit of a compression. It's really hard to explain, but you can't feel your lungs expanding. You can't, and you're so overwhelmed because you don't know what in the hell's going on. And so yeah, she thank God she was there, because of course the doctor came in, and typical military, he's like, well, I see that you're still you've got a newborn, your husband's deployed, like it was, and he was acting
Like you're
so
suddenly being
nonchalant.
hysterical or something.
Well, somehow it's my fault, and I
Yes.
was making it up. I was being over dramatic because you just need. Yeah, I know you're overly tired. Don't worry about it. People have babies all the time. Just get over it. It's my fault, and I'm making this up. So luckily, Lynn was there, and she's like, she needs an MRI. She might have MS. She needs to get changed, or she needs to get evaluated for that. And he's like, I mean, you could sit there. He was like literally holding my folder. He's just like, whatever. You're a commander. You're in charge. And I was, and she definitely went to the map for me, and they kind of had it out. And so I'm looking between him, and he's saying, he's blowing me off, and she's getting after him. And I'm like, should I make some popcorn? Because this is a really good argument.
But you know what? Haven't we? I think most women have seen this happen before, haven't we? Where you have that nurse in the room. It's usually a
Yeah.
nurse. Sometimes it's a younger doctor. That woman who hears what you're saying and looks to that male doctor and says, "No, this is what needs to happen." And I
Yeah,
find
this
that
is
very
legitimate.
heard the story. I mean, it's happened to me, and I've heard the
Mm-hmm.
story from so many other people. A friend of mine was diagnosed with cervical cancer thanks to a female nurse in the room who said to the male doctor who tried to tell her that maybe she was just having rough sex, "No, this is a problem. We need to get her tested immediately. And I think she has cervical cancer," which she did. So, for all of us women, thank goodness for the medical, female medical professionals out there who stand up for us.
Yeah, and they're like the proverbial dog on a bone. They're like, no, listen, you're
Hmm.
not hearing what the patient is saying.
Yeah.
Why and what it would and why? Or I feel like it's almost like a collusion kind of a thing. It's like, what's the difference? Are you paying for the medical procedures? No, you have no reason to not follow up
Yeah.
on this, to not sit there and say, you know what, I might just be blown out of proportion, but let's send you for an MRI. Let's take a little bit of a better look at this. Let's take a moment, even have a nurse go through it and say, ask these bazillion questions and find out the dates and times if you can, to kind of do the background search for you, to sit there and figure out the pieces of the puzzle to put the puzzle together. But they don't want to. So anyway, so Lynn got me in for the MRI like the next day. And it was amazing. Very long procedure. MRIs are so much fun, right?
Oh, well, it's for me when I had to go for my MRI to get the MS diagnosis. It was a 3-hour MRI, but they had to give me all the pills to knock me out. Otherwise, I lost it.
Yes, it's very, very cozy.
It's way too cozy for somebody who is claustrophobic. That's for certain.
Yeah. So to her credit, the person who did my MRI was absolutely lovely. And she goes, would you like a warm blanket? I'm like, yes, I would. Because again, I'm exhausted. I'm working 60 hours a week with the Coast Guard. I've got the brand new baby. Jason's deployed. We've got a chocolate lab at home. I hired somebody to come pick up the dog poop. It was great. I'm like, who did I make it out to? Can I pay you 6 months in advance? Yeah, you're godsend. Thank you. But so anyway, so they took they got the results back, and she got me in with Dr. Hornstein, who happened to be like the top 5 neurologists in the country. His wife was a counselor, and she was with the MS Society. So I was so fortunate. I'm so grateful that they got me into like a therapy group and whatnot. But yeah, so that was so. In the Coast Guard, you're not allowed to be in the Coast Guard with
Right.
MS.
Once you have MS, Crohn's, lupus,
You're
your military career is effectively over. They're getting you out of there. It's just a
what?
matter of whether you get medical retirement,
Mm-hmm.
ability, and that in and of itself is, a fight for your life, really.
Well, that and there's nobody you can't talk to. And I don't know about Army and the Navy, like the larger services, but the Coast Guard, we had nobody.
It's
There
the
was no.
same. You have to
There,
reach out. Often people hire attorneys.
yeah.
You're losing your entire career and nobody's really. And if the military is looking out for itself,
And
like
why?
you as little
Who's
as
money?
possible. They're there for Uncle Sam.
Yeah, whose
We're
money are they
here. Let's
saving?
see how
I
little we
mean,
can give you.
yes. So the Coast Guard wanted us to discharge medical discharge at 30% from the Coast Guard, and they said, "Well, that's okay. You just go through the VA, and the VA will make up. You could deal with the VA. VA will help you." No, they won't, because there's nobody there to help you either. I mean, at that time, I think it's a lot better now.
It is
Unfortunately,
much better
after,
today.
after the
Yes.
war, and I mean, again, the Coast Guard was discharging me with 30% for MS, and right now, they're giving sounds sounds bad, but they're giving men with ED 30%. I'm like,
Well, there's no real. I mean, that's a conversation for another day, certainly. But there's no
right.
real equality in the
Mm-mm.
disability often. I've met people. Well, there's a guy who used to work for my husband who is 100%, but he lost his leg in Afghanistan. So it makes perfect sense. He lost a leg.
Mm-hmm.
But you meet other people who are 100% and they've got a bad back. Are those equal? Do they have to be equal? Maybe not. But it
Right.
is certainly a system that's very difficult to get through, um, and understand how do you get what you're deserved after the military has, you know,
They're done with you.
done done with your health.
Yeah, yeah, I do believe that while there's no clear cause for MS or in a lot of other autoimmune diseases, but you have to sit there and look at the environment that we're in, but the atmosphere we were in, the
Oh, absolutely.
environmental, the um, everything, the holistic
Well, we're
environment you
still
were
learning
in, and
about what different things have done to various service members over the years. We're still learning about Agent Orange from
Agent
Vietnam.
Orange, and
I
now
mean,
the burn pits. Yeah, they're finally taking responsibility for that. That
yeah,
was
years ago.
those
Well,
were
it's
our
still okay.
parents. Yeah,
Yeah.
those were our parents when they were in their 20s.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how long it takes to get some resolution, and in reality all we want is some modicum of our life back.
Yeah. Something you can depend on, something you can build your life around. Medical, financial, emotional. Uh, where do you go? Who do you call? What's a trusted resource? And there's
Yeah.
nothing, and they just toss you out. And
They'll do what they can to get rid of you for as cheap as possible. And like we were just talking about, I don't want to depend on marrying well for my life. I was an
no.
independent woman. You went through the Coast Guard Academy and became a Coast Guard officer. I went through Army ROTC and commissioned as an Army officer. I
Hmm.
wasn't exactly the woman going to class in my high heels and makeup and hanging outside the med school building hoping for, a nice marriage proposal by
They,
graduation. I was independent. I don't want
right.
to depend on my husband.
No,
No.
because we want to stand on our own feet. And it's not like a man hater kind of a statement, but you want to be able to
Absolutely
support
not.
yourself. We don't want to depend on somebody, not
No.
because it's not who we are. We want to discover and challenge ourselves and go. And that's one thing I told Jason. He's been very supportive of me. He and I met at flight school. He's incredibly supportive, but I said, I never wanted to be dependent. Not so much I didn't want to be dependent on somebody. I wanted to be independent.
Independence is the key. That's exactly what I try to tell people when people have said to me over and over again, Well, you don't need to work. Your husband can take care of you. I say that's not the point. I need
Yeah.
something to fill my own life. I need to contribute to society, to contribute to our country, our culture, our population. It's very important to me to
Yeah.
wake up in the morning with purpose. So, you know, giving me an ability to do that, I think is very important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this all goes back to self-esteem and your self-image and your drive. I mean, if not, when we get sick, if we didn't have that drive forward, then we would just sit there and stagnate. And then if you stagnate, we're what's gonna happen? Honestly, with
Nothing that happens.
detrimental how detrimental it is to your spirit and your
No,
body.
and I'm convinced, I've been talking about it so much that your mental and emotional well being directly affects your physical well being.
Oh
And
yeah.
I can certainly say, obviously time is a factor.
Hmm.
Since I got off the medication, I had a reaction to, but also with the Crohn's disease, all of my health issues. When I am addressing my mental health and I'm getting my emotional health in a better place, my physical health improves at least somewhat. I
Yeah.
may not be, the healthiest person in the world, but there certainly is a correlation.
Sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was going to say, so I ended up getting medically retired from the Coast Guard. Oh goodness,
Yeah.
January of '03. They admin screwed up my paperwork. They tried to get me out of my was it DD 219.
Mhm.
Um, my
DD.
discharge 214. Thank you. It's been a while.
I know.
So I mean, when I was reading my DD 214, and I said, wait a minute, I said, am I being punked? And they look at me. I'm like, no, seriously. It says here I'm not even a high school graduate. Are you kidding me?
How did I
Yeah,
get into the Coast Guard Academy?
yeah. Although I did know somebody who was actually a high school dropout, just financial reasons for his family. He had to drop out to support his family. Smart guy, electrical engineer. Man, Sean was fantastic. But the information is all incorrect. My dates were off. My qualifications were off. My training was off. It just, and I was like, who? But if I hadn't actually like looked at it seriously, because my stepdad was actually a yeoman, so he was admin. I
Hmm.
just assumed, why would they have incorrect paperwork? It's
But
not that hard,
it's not, but you know what? That's
you
probably
know?
one of the most important things I've learned in general in life when it comes to advocating for yourself, advocating for your health, advocating for your career, advocating for something you need in life. You've got to check the details because somebody else might not. And knowing the details and knowing what you are entitled to is so important and fighting to ensure it's done correctly.
Yeah. And knowing which manual, because it says clearly on this page, on this second paragraph, third sentence, it says this is what I'm entitled to. And so why, for instance, they didn't allow me, or they just I had a lot of leave, but see, because I was sick in quarters, I didn't actually deserve that leave of two and a
Oh,
half
that's not
days
how the military
a month.
works.
Yeah, so they took it back and they paid me, but they didn't give me the housing allowance for 2.5 months. And in Southern California, that's kind of pivotal. So that's, you figure that's, gosh, 25, probably 3,000 a month.
You know
So
what
that,
I find this crazy, and other military will probably think the same. I'm sure civilian, because in the civilian community, if you don't work, generally speaking, you don't get paid.
mhm.
But in the military, how many people get to go when there are usually a captain, maybe a junior major, get to go to graduate school and just go to school every day and have fun while getting paid as a full-time captain or major?
I know it's awesome.
It is one of the greatest benefits of the U.S. military. But
Yeah.
to think that there's people where right now as we're doing this, there are people who are already out of class
Mhm.
and being paid as a major, even though they're now sitting at the Starbucks with a friend having a coffee.
But although I can say this though, I mean, we were actually discouraged from Jason. Jason was discouraged from going to Naval Post Grad School in Monterey when he was in, because that was going to kill his career,
Oh no, that's
and
a
you don't want to do that.
oh,
And so a couple of our peers, got to go to Monterey, and somehow they still made lieutenant colonel.
Yep.
So I'm like, we could have really used that time, but
It is a nice time, especially after deployment.
yeah. So I mean, we were doing the deployment. So he did 5 deployments in 6 or 7 years, and just it was just one after another. And so
Yeah.
I think one of your questions was going to be, what would I do differently? I would have advocated for MS. I would have sat there and said, I can't do this. And you have to listen, because not only can't I do it, like I can't be out in the heat, and I can't, and I don't care if I'm in the shade or not, because my body's going, no, you need to get
Well,
back in your air conditioning
that's
and
I do
drink
always ask
some,
people, what do you wish you knew when you were first diagnosed?
fight for
And
myself.
yeah, fight for it. Be honest.
Say,
Don't You're not wrong. If you're feeling a
no.
certain way, you're feeling it.
Yeah, and you need, and we need to hire a nanny. We need to hire a babysitter. We need to
Yep.
hire housekeepers or something, because it was just, but it's all, I'm a Marine Corps wife and I can do it all, and I'm going to
Yeah. We all think
make
we can.
brownies for the meeting, and I'm going to help this young wife, and I'm going to, get us ready to, make us all spiffy for the photos and the command fun, the mandatory fun type thing. And I can barely walk because I'm just so exhausted and I'm dizzy, and I just, yeah, it was awful. It was so hard. And Jason, I think that he knew that I was sick, but I don't think it wasn't until I said, we were actually in San Francisco. We were at the Marine Corps Memorial Hotel, and they were walking a block and a half ahead of me. And he's like, "Well, come on, let's go. It's downhill. Why can't you walk any faster?" He said it nicely, so that's why he's still alive. But I said, "I literally can't make my legs go any faster. I'm a cross country runner. I played soccer and also all these other things. I can't make my
Yeah.
body do this. It just won't."
I think that's one of the most important lessons to learn, and it's probably the most difficult. Acknowledge that, you know what, I'm sick and I can't do this today, and that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sorry. I know I'm getting off track. So what
It's
would you like
okay.
to ask
Actually, you
me?
came right back to it so well, because that is the question I like to ask everybody, because I think it's important to put all of these things together. What do we all wish we knew when we were first diagnosed, or, when you first became a caregiver, or when you first got involved, with whatever you're involved with? Because the lessons are important ones. And unfortunately, it takes all of us sometimes many, many years to learn some of them. So
Hmm.
I think that's important. And you did advocate well for yourself getting out of the Coast Guard.
But it took years to
It,
do
it,
that.
it's tough
And
work.
then, well, and then also one thing I also want to say to advocate for is the Social Security disability is, so we did, oh goodness, 3 or 4 tour. He did 3 or 4 tours, I should say. By the
Mhm.
time I got out of the Coast Guard and moved down to Oceanside, we bought a house. We'd already had Sam. So Sam was about 3.5 years old when, well, he was about 3 when we decided to have the second child, Emma, and she was born. So he deployed, and he was supposed to be back like the beginning of December. She was due December 23rd. He came back in April. We were supposed to move to, and so, yeah. Ah, so not only did he make the birth, she was 4 months old when he met her. That was after six. It would have been 6 months
Yes. Military
of when she
service.
was born, and he showed up 4 months after that. So sold the house, moved across country. We were in down in Stafford, which is right by Quantico, and Jason was working at Quantico, and my neurologist there was, he was a very good doctor, and but he was a previous military doctor, a civilian military doctor. So I was like, but I was having one exacerbation after another. I was on betaseron, which is a subcutaneous shot. It's every other day, but it hurt. and I'd have these big red welts on my legs, my back, my arms, and tops of legs. And again, I mean, really, do you want to get stung by the hornet every other day? No. So you're like, did I do it the other day? I'll do it tomorrow. And so I wasn't very as compliant as I should have been. Anyway, so I said, I'd like to change medicine. And he said, well, why would you go to a different medicine? You're not compliant with this one. I said, I'm not compliant because I'm having big red welts. And so anyway, and then I said about going for Social Security disability. But again, I've not been told anything about this stuff. I have no idea who to call, how to do it. I think I was
It's
one of
like
those infomercials, call now for malpractice or whatever. And so I wanted to file for it. And he looks at me and he says, do you really think you're that sick? But it was kind of one of those,
question you.
I think you're being a malinger. Are you really that hurting? And I felt I should have said, yes, I am. But it wasn't until I stood up for myself. But again, by that time I'd already been denied 3 times. Wasn't getting any help from him. And luckily we had moved back to California anyway. So I tried it when I was back in California. My doctor there, he's like, well, and of course I hadn't kept any of the paperwork because again, my life is just like, it's crazy. I've got a 1-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old starting kindergarten. I'm trying to be class mom. I'm trying to be the awesome Marine Corps wife and everything. I'm just so overwhelmed and exhausted. But I mean, it's, the exhaustion, it's not just a normal, I need to nap. I'm falling asleep on the stairs.
Yes.
Who does that?
We all know about falling asleep in random places.
Exactly. You're like, I'm just gonna lay down here. But anyway, it wasn't until there I actually ended up hiring a lawyer. $12,000 and 2 more years of him in his office filing the paperwork and doing this stuff and doing that stuff. Now I tried to do it myself. And I remember crying to Jason. I'm just bawling. I'm like, can you please help me? And he's like, it's just government forms. It's not that hard. In his brain, you're right. It shouldn't have been that hard. But when you have to focus on the ability to get up, get dressed, eat something, make sure you schedule or try to schedule a nap and, accepting when you're so focused on living your life on a 24-hour basis, you don't have time for the thought process and the scheduling and time, the timelines that need to be submitted by and notarized or whatever, because you're just like, you just can't do it. And you don't know why you can't. You used to be smart.
You're right. And I think we've all had, you have the severe fatigue. We've dealt with the brain fog. I had a big problem with brain fog just last week when I did my previous podcast episode. I kept forgetting words. And
Yeah.
does that mean I can never do anything? No, of course not. But at that moment, did I need a nap? Was that particular task difficult? It was.
Yeah.
It was.
And you feel like such a failure.
You do.
You're like, why can't I get my stuff together? So 12, I think it's like $12,000, which is not tax deductible, FYI.
It's not.
But
you did finally get Social Security disability.
Yeah.
Huge fight.
Finally. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for it. But again, if I have issues with trying to do this, and not to toot my own horn, but I went to a good college just like you did.
I always tell people, I'm a pushy broad.
Yeah, we're going and going and going. We're like, yes, there's a problem. Yes, I've got a solution. And let's go and schedule and and get everybody working together and on you go. And I remember I had a panic attack trying to get to the commissary because I was picking up birthday cupcakes for Sam's birthday. He was in 2nd grade, and I have a full-blown anxiety attack because I'm worried that I'm not going to get enough cupcakes. I'm not going to have enough miniature cupcakes that are all sealed up, and so you can bring them in there because you can't make anything yourself. and
And it's
cupcakes
you're just doing all you can.
for a second
Our
grader.
next I'm
So
our next podcast together, I definitely want to talk about anxiety because we all deal with anxiety. It's such a big part of having an illness, a chronic illness. And nobody talks about it. It should the very first thing I believe should be done when you're diagnosed with a chronic illness is you should also be immediately sent for mental health care. Put them as a part of your team. Make that a part of your health care plan.
yes,
We all deal with anxiety. I've had panic attacks over things you would never believe, but it's
it's,
part of our
I
life.
mean, well, between anxiety and depression
Mhm.
and just, and the shame,
Yep.
because you can't do stuff anymore.
Yeah.
We're both pushy rods, and
Yeah. But you brought
and
now I
we,
can do everything I
and,
want to. It is
and
difficult.
we're so dependent on somebody else, and it's another thing that kind of kills our spirit too, because but
It does. But it's a fact of life. It's a
yeah,
great point to end on. You know, best thing to learn is to advocate for yourself and really stand up and say, "Hey, I'm sick. This is what I can't do." And then every day, the stuff we're going to keep learning and keep talking about is depression, anxiety, and the shame of feeling like you're not being the best you because of your illness.
yeah,
And
because
that's
we can really do better. It's like I'm
that's our
trying, I'm
life.
really trying. Oh, I think, and also, so keeping screen for the anxiety and depression, but also allergy testing. And why not? It sounds really silly, but why not just hand stuff out to saying, you know what? Why don't you just try the elimination diet? If you wanted to do it, this is
Now,
how
that
you
was one
would.
thing they had me do up front, I will say.
I mean, because I don't know how to do that stuff. Why not sit there and say, you know what? Again, the little double asterisk,
Yeah, part of the care team.
you might maybe look into this. It could help, it may not. I don't know.
It's
Other
all
people
part
have been
of the care
successful
team.
for it, and just makes you
We have
understand your body a little bit more.
the nutritionist, the
Yeah.
exercise science, the mental health, the rheumatologist or the neurologist or the gastroenterologist, whoever it is that you need to see for your physical. You know, it's
Hmm.
all part of a team. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get at. Find a
Yeah.
way to get that perfect team put together so we can better live our lives. And for some of us, the attorney to ensure you're getting what you deserve from the VA or Social Security disability.
Well, and also I was going to say, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes you feel like you're chasing your tail. Between chasing your tail and then the whack-a-mole, boom, 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 because you're exhausted. Well, then, okay, am I hydrated? Am I eating properly? Again, nutritionist and sensitivities. And then do you have rest? Have you been hydrating? Or have you been drinking too much coffee? You know,
It's a daily battle.
so.
It
But
really is.
I'm just happy to be here, and thank you so much for asking the
Thank you
question.
so much for coming here and sharing your life and what it's like for you to be living chronic. Thank
Yeah.
you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Brandy. Appreciate it.